Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. Most men don't realize they have way more power to change their situation than they believe. They think they're stuck waiting for the tension to ease or waiting for their wife to be less distant, waiting for the marriage to feel lighter, easier, or more connected. And because waiting feels passive, it also feels safe. There's no risk in hoping things improve, no discomfort in telling yourself, maybe this is just a phase. Maybe spring will feel better. Maybe it will just work itself out. But here's what I want you to hear right away. Waiting is still a choice, and it's a costly one. If you're listening to this, chances are you're doing a lot right in your life. You show up, you provide, you try, and yet at home you may feel disconnected, frustrated, or quietly lonely in a way that you don't talk about very much. This episode isn't about blaming you, and it's not about fixing your wife or your marriage overnight. It's about helping you see where your influence actually is, because it's more than you've been led to believe. In just 12 weeks, spring will be here. How you feel in your marriage when it arrives won't be determined by luck or timing. It will be shaped by what you choose to do or not to do, starting right now. Today, I want to talk about why waiting keeps men stuck. What changes when you stop hoping things will improve and start engaging differently with yourself and your marriage. Welcome to episode 37. Stop hoping your marriage will get better. Waiting doesn't feel like giving up. For most men, it might feel responsible, patient, even mature. You tell yourself you're avoiding conflict and you're giving things time, you're not overreacting, you're being steady. On the surface, that might make sense. The problem is that waiting slowly turns into avoidance, and avoidance quietly reshapes your relationship. When you wait, you stop initiating conversations that feel uncomfortable. You stop leaning in to connect. You stop asking for what you want because it hasn't gone well before. You tell yourself it's not worth the fight or that now just isn't the right time. And over time, your marriage doesn't stay neutral. It actually drifts. Connection fades. Resentment starts to build. Intimacy becomes awkward or transactional, or it outright disappears. And the longer this goes on, the harder it feels to know where to even start. What makes this especially tricky is that many men are highly capable in other areas of their life. When something isn't working at work, you assess it and you adjust your approach and take action. But at home, those same instincts get tangled up with emotion and history and fear of rejection. So instead of acting, you wait. It isn't because you don't care, but it's because you don't know what to do that would actually help. Waiting gives you the illusion of peace, but it quietly costs you closeness. And the longer you stay there, the more it will start to feel like this is just how things are. One of the biggest reasons men keep waiting is because they misunderstand where they have power. They assume influence means control. If I can't make her feel differently, respond differently, or want something different, then I must be stuck. But the real influence in a marriage doesn't really work that way. Your leverage isn't in changing her behavior. It's in changing how you show up emotionally, consistently, and over time. Most men underestimate how much the emotional tone of the relationship is shaped by them. You're not doing something wrong, but you have been taught to focus on fixing problems instead of creating connection. When you shift your focus from outcomes to engagement, things start to move. That looks like staying present in uncomfortable moments instead of pulling back. It looks like expressing yourself without bracing for rejection. It looks like taking emotional risks even when there's no guarantee of an immediate payoff. This is where many men get discouraged. They try once, it doesn't go well, and they decide it's pointless. But connection isn't built in a single moment. It's built through repeated signals of safety, steadiness, and emotional availability. When you change how you engage, the dynamic of your marriage changes. Sometimes slowly, sometimes subtly, but it does change. The men who see the biggest shifts are the ones who stop waiting for certainty and start leading themselves emotionally, even when it feels unfamiliar. When men pull back, it's rarely because they don't care. More often, it's because they're afraid of rejection. They've tried before, they've reached out, they've asked for connection, initiated conversations, or leaned in emotionally. A lot of times, this looks like asking for sex. And somewhere along the way, it didn't land. Maybe it turned into an argument. Maybe she brushed you off. Maybe it just didn't go anywhere. So they stopped. From their perspective, staying quiet feels like self-protection. If I don't reach, then I can't be rejected. If I don't ask, I can't be turned down. If I don't bring it up, I won't make things worse. But here's the part that most men don't see until it's named. When you stay hidden, she often experiences that as rejection. Not because she knows what you are afraid of, but because she can see the distance, the silence, and the lack of emotional engagement. What feels like caution to you can feel like indifference to her. And over time, that gap grows. She might stop initiating too, conversations or sex. She might become critical or withdrawn. She may assume that you don't care or that you've already emotionally checked out. This is how two people can feel so rejected at the same time, each quietly protecting themselves, each waiting for the other to make the first move. From the outside, it looks like disconnection, but underneath it, most often I find that it's fear. When men hear this, many finally recognize why waiting hasn't created the safety or closeness that they were hoping for. It puts language to something that's been happening quietly for a long time. Avoiding rejection does not create closeness. It creates the very distance you are trying to prevent. There's a reason that this conversation feels more urgent right now. As winter starts to lift, many people feel a quiet pull to reassess. That's what New Year's does. The days get long, energy shifts, and you start thinking about how you want to feel when spring really arrives. For men who've been waiting in their marriage, this time of year can feel especially heavy. Another season passed, another stretch of hoping that things would improve and having a lot of evidence of how bad they are. Another mental promise to revisit this later. 12 weeks is long enough to see real movement, but short enough that your current patterns are still close to the surface. In that window, you can change how you show up in conversations, how you can rebuild emotional safety. You can interrupt the habits that keep you silent or reactive. You can start feeling different in your own body, not just thinking differently. What 12 weeks doesn't allow for is staying stuck and vague. Waiting another season rarely creates clarity. It usually reinforces the same loops, the same distance, the same quiet resignation that nothing will ever really change. This isn't about fixing everything by spring. It's about deciding whether you want to enter the next season of your life, still hoping things will improve, or knowing that you're actively working on what matters most to you. Most meaningful change in a marriage doesn't come from dramatic moments. It comes from sustained, intentional effort applied consistently over time. And 12 weeks is enough time to feel a difference between waiting and engaging. You might be listening to this realizing that 12 weeks feels like a real window for change, and that's not an accident. The work I do with clients is built around a 12-week container for that reason. It's long enough to slow down old patterns and build new ones, and short enough that you stay engaged instead of drifting. This isn't about quick fixes or dramatic overhauls. This is about consistent, supported work during a season where change is actually possible. You don't need to know yet if this is right for you, but a call is where we would sort it all out. We can find out what's realistic and whether getting support makes sense. There'll be a link in the show notes if you'd like to book a call with me. When men stop waiting, the first thing that changes usually isn't their marriage. It's them. They feel steadier in their own body, less reactive, less internally tense. They stop replaying conversations or bracing for the next one. That internal shift matters more than men expect because it changes how they show up everywhere, but especially at home. Conversations start to feel different. They aren't perfect. They're not magically easy now, but maybe they're more honest. There's less defensiveness, less posturing, and more presence. Men often notice that they're no longer trying to win arguments or avoid them altogether. They're staying in the conversation even when it's uncomfortable. They don't collapse or escalate things. And over time, that steadiness creates something many relationships have been missing for a very long time: safety. When safety increases, intimacy has somewhere to land. Emotional closeness becomes possible again. Physical intimacy often follows. And it's not because it was demanded or negotiated, but because the dynamic shifted. What surprises many men is that even before the relationship fully changes, they feel different about themselves. They respect how they're showing up. They trust themselves more. They stop feeling like they're waiting for permission to be okay. And whether the marriage shifts quickly or more gradually, that internal clarity stays. That's the difference between hoping things improve and knowing you are actively shaping the outcome. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it's this: waiting is not neutral. It shapes how you feel about yourself. It shapes how safe the relationship feels. And over time, it shapes what you come to expect from your marriage. You do not need certainty to begin. You don't need guarantees. You don't need your partner to change first. You just need to be willing to stop hiding out and start engaging differently. Spring is coming, and how you feel in your marriage when it arrives will be influenced by the choices you make right now. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. You can keep hoping things will improve, or you can decide that this season matters enough to show up differently, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's unfamiliar. If listening to this helped you see yourself more clearly, that alone is meaningful. Awareness is the beginning of change, and if you're ready to take the next step, whether that's listening more closely, reaching out differently, or getting support, trust that instinct. You don't have to rush, but you don't have to wait either. Take care. See you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.